Hello, all. Good afternoon and good evening. If you're joining from any of this ANZ region, my name is BMK. I'm your host today, and I have the best in the industry, one of the great thought leader, practitioner, and author, Steve, with us on flow engineering. And this session is AMA session, so it's a free flow. As we start with a couple of questions, and please feel free to ask Steve questions, all the hard questions. The reason why I say that, because it's 1 a.m. in Canada. So he's up and doing this for us. So feel free. He doesn't need a coffee early in the morning, but our meetup will keep him awake for, through the rest of the day for him. Once again, thank you very much, Steve, for doing. And all the participants, please welcome you all for this. And if you're new to this community and you know what is, if you already joined and if you know what we do in the meetup, so please put your first name and last name in your profile so we know the people who are joining are real people, not the bots, by the way. And uh, also, when you have an opportunity to ask questions, so we will be able to bring you on screen and you can ask directly the question to the author. Please do that. And also a gentle reminder, this session is being recorded, and then after this, the recording will be available through our BBSSH YouTube channel. And with that note, we will straight away get into the topic. We have Steve with us, and Steve on flow engineering. I would like to first of all congratulate Steve because I saw the news from IT Revolution, one of my favorite publisher, that you guys have won the Pub West Best Design Book Design Award yesterday, right? So I mean that happened last week. So I read about that as well, Steve, and thank you very much. And once again, congratulations on the flow engineering. I would like to welcome you to this meetup, and please introduce yourself, and then we can take it from there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be back and I appreciate the congratulations on the book. We had a great design team. I had very little to do with that. So we picked a couple options for the cover, tried to stay out of stepping on people's toes, so that design award is well earned by others. But very, very pleased, very, very pleased with the reception to the book, and everyone's been wonderful with their feedback. And it's really been surprising to hear responses to the content of the book across all the different areas that we kind of hope to reach, but are reaching, whether that's physical manufacturing. I've got good friendships at Toyota now that are only happening because some of those folks read the book, and not because they saw Toyota in the book. It's because they're kind of fond of the way that we do things, very lightweight and collaborative. I'm actually going to do some training at Toyota, which is kind of a one of my stretch goals was to just not be, chastised by Toyota and some of the folks that I think are experts in the field. And so it's been wonderful to see the positive reception to the book and the practices and folks making templates and talking about their experiences. It's really fantastic. So for anyone who doesn't know me, I've been in tech for over 2 decades, about more than half my life now. And I've been really focused on flow the entire time. I would actually just dug up like a performance review. I was cleaning out documents and I found a performance review of mine. It was kind of like a self-assessment from 2011. And this is before I really knew anything about what we talk about now. But, I was talking about, working across different departments and trying to optimize and automate and bring folks of different roles together. I was a build and release engineer, and I didn't even know, that that was a field. I didn't even know about continuous delivery at the time. So um, it's interesting to see that thread. And I think there's a lot of folks out there who really feel this, need for removing friction in organizations and removing everything that makes it difficult to get things done. So um, you could call that flow engineering from my perspective. And I'm very, very passionate about that. And it's been something that I've been passionate about, I think, my whole life.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Steve. Given this free flow and free format session, I would like to start off with my one question first, Steve. Um, we worked together in the past in the community for value stream management consortium, and then I mean I'm really keen to understand how did you get started with this book idea, flow engineering, and what actually made you to write this book, and you and Andrew.
Well, I mean, flow engineering started as an ebook um, around 2017. And it was an effort to make value stream mapping more accessible to folks because I kept having these conversations where folks would talk about, well, actually, I would talk about value stream management or value stream mapping to folks because I discovered it by accident. I discovered it out of necessity. I was in, a role as a CTO and I was really struggling to get things done. And so I had to step away from being in the work and look at how the work was working and where it was getting stuck. And I just did that in a spreadsheet and shared it with the team and got everybody in the team to kind of fill in their piece. And we built out this, it wasn't even really a map, but it mapped out the flow of activity in the organization and it helped us eliminate a ton of waste. And then I really got interested in it because it just, you know, produced such positive results. It wasn't just saving time. It was like all of a sudden I could show that to the leadership. I could show that to the board as things that we were doing to improve performance. It really got the team excited that we weren't just stuck and slowing down more and more all the time. And all of a sudden, we were having better conversations across all these different roles in the environment because we had a common language, we had a common reference point. So I started talking to people about value stream mapping. I looked into value stream mapping and I didn't like what I saw. I saw a lot of material that didn't resonate with me. I was working in a digital distributed software development organization. And so in the way that I was doing it didn't map onto what I was seeing out in the market. So I just produced something that I thought was a gap that other people might benefit from. And then the other piece was that I knew that it was very, very difficult to just get into value stream mapping. Like if you just start trying to map a value stream, you usually run into a ton of different challenges. You will have too much detail, you'll map the wrong things, you'll map too small or too large. You won't know where to stop. You won't know what information is valuable and what information is not valuable. There's tons of problems that you have if you don't focus on what are you mapping for, right? What is the purpose of the value stream map that you're building? So um, that was one problem to solve from my perspective. And another problem to solve was what do you do after you have the map? Because a lot of folks that I would talk to would say, yeah, we did value stream mapping, we created this map, and it just kind of like sat on the shelf. Like nobody did anything with it. Um, it was great to make the map, but it didn't actually end up helping us out. So there was a gap in initial focus and establishing scope. There was a gap in execution based on what you discover in the map. And so um, flow engineering was really um, kind of something that evolved out of the need to fill that gap and give it a catchy name. So, of course, people love platform engineering, site reliability engineering, all the engineerings. But flow and making work better doesn't get any love, right? Like nobody cares about it. So how do we make it sexy? How do we make it something that folks will pay attention to? So that was the genesis of the flow engineering part. And it was really just an effort to package it up in a way that people would pay attention to. Um, so that was the genesis, and that was around 2017. And then um, I met Andrew at a lean coffee session where he was asking about what books I would recommend on value stream mapping, and I mentioned Karen's book, who is wonderful, and her book is fantastic, but it's not focused on our community of DevOps and technologists, and it's pretty rigorous in its practice. But I think that there's a gap in the market for folks who are, you know, between 0 and 1, between not doing anything and wanting to do something. And so flow engineering is sort of targeted at the folks who are trying to get, it's almost like trying to get off the couch, as opposed to running the perfect marathon, just like getting out there, lacing up the shoes and getting out there. Flow engineering really aims to be something that folks can get started with very easily and then grow with as they grow.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the idea how it started and what you were trying to solve. I think this community is similar to you, Steve. Like all these people are one way or other they are the change agents and change champions in the organization, trying to challenge the status quo in the organization, how we can do something effectively and very efficiently, and that is also from the name, the better value sooner, safer, and happier. Um, I mean, it's good that like, already. Thank you very much for all the participants. You used the questions have started pouring in because it seems like one of the very interesting topic for everyone. I'll ask you one simple question, and then probably we'll go to the participants one. From your view, how in a simple definition for value stream, what do you mean by value stream? Now, how do you differentiate this from the customer journey mapping or product journey or product roadmap? How do you differentiate these things? Now, what is the
Mm.
definition of value stream?
I think this is a really important question. It's particularly the difference between a value stream and a customer journey. And I think that you can see those things as extremely similar from one context. If you zoom far enough out, they have common characteristics. But if you really want to use them to get results, I think there are notable differences between those things. And so let me start with value stream. I really like James Martin's definition. James Martin wrote a book in the 90s. I think it might even have been 1990, but it was the early 90s at least, maybe 95, called The Great Transition. It's an incredible book. It's large and comprehensive, um, but it's almost like prophetic. It's really talking about where we are as a business, as an industry now. And it was very long ago. But he defined a value stream as kind of the sequence of activities that build and deliver value for a customer. And that customer can be internal to the organization or external to the organization. He talks about that a couple different ways. Some people will say that the only true value stream is to a paying customer, like somebody who's ultimately paying for the result of the value stream. I don't have a problem with that definition, but I think it's more narrow than um, the opportunity um, to kind of scope the concept of a value stream really effectively. Like to me, I don't care if the customer is inside the company or outside the company, because the state of the industry right now is that we don't have good outcomes in either place, really. Across most organizations, we really struggle. with this idea of value and value delivery and serving customers and understanding customer needs and having continuous delivery. So if we were at a level in the industry that, you know, we're doing fantastic, then we can get really specific about this is technically not a value stream and that's technically a value stream. But to me, I think we're at that 0 to 1 space. We're trying to get off the couch with a lot of this stuff. And so I like the idea that it refocuses our attention on value delivery, it refocuses our attention on continuous delivery. So making sure that we aren't just doing big bang releases and projects and throughout the organization, because I think that what we really have in organizations is a network of work and considering the person next to you. So from a Kanban perspective, Kanban basically says that the next person that you hand your work to is your customer. And I think that's very positive. I think that's a very helpful way to think about your work. Um, I don't think that folks are taking that to the conclusion that I'm going to ignore my external customer, the person who's paying the bills. And so I think that's positive. If you get to a point where, you're so focused on internal customers that you forget that you have to pay the bills, then maybe you shift your focus a little bit more external. So that to me is a value stream. Um, the difference between a value stream and a customer journey, um, the big difference is that a customer journey is a customer moving themselves through a flow of activities and deriving value at different stages. So they derive value from a customer journey by, awareness. So going from feeling like nobody can solve their problem to identifying a possible solution, and then all the way to solving that problem and then recommending the solution to other people. But the customer's moving through that flow. And you can't drag that customer through the flow, right? There's no pull to that in the same way that you can pull work through a system. You have far less control. So you could say that you have pull in that system, but the pull would likely become very manipulative if you're actually pulling your customers through the customer journey. So I don't think that's very positive to use as a framing. So customer journey, a customer is moving through phases of awareness all the way to kind of recommendation. And it's very difficult to consider as a value stream because lead time is not really a factor that you have any control over. You don't really have a control over any of the aspects of performance that we would measure in a value stream. So I think it kind of falls apart there. And it's more valuable to consider things like sentiment and identity and all these factors that really have a positive impact on that customer journey that are not metrics and measures that you use in a value stream. So I see them as, similar in terms of there is flow, but very different in terms of what does success look like and how do you actually optimize flow across a value stream, across a customer journey. Those are very different in practice.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Steve, for the perspective. Highly appreciate that. And I love the idea of the value stream. And I also remember some of the purists fighting about the actual definition of the value stream. So I remember the LinkedIn viral post that happened last year sometime. People arguing about what is the best definition of the value stream and why it is not a value stream, etc. But anyway, that's not for this meetup session to discuss, but that will be another session. Once again, thank you very much for those who are posting the questions via the chat. Highly appreciate that, and please get that coming. I would like to welcome now Chris Com to the screen. So, Chris, feel free to unmute
All
yourself
right.
and then you can be on the screen and you can ask the question. And also, Chris, welcome to Australia. And we
Thank
go.
you, thank you, thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
I should say good day.
Or it's yeah.
So not a massive question, but I guess since the book's been out, what's kind of your take on how the conversations have been evolving with potential customers that come your way and are interested in this topic now? Is there kind of um, as opposed to just come fix my thing? Is it more nuanced to people sort of thinking about things a bit more deeply? What's kind of the conversations that you're having with people now?
I would love to say that folks don't come to me and ask me to fix things. I think it's wonderful, and I feel very, very lucky and privileged to get those calls. But there is a lot of there's still, I think, and justifiably so, folks have, acute pains or they have goals and they're looking for a solution that allows them to get back to ultimately the thing that they're in business for, right? I mean, this is the challenge with flow and performance improvement is that it's ultimately not the thing that customers are buying from you, even though it's the way to all of those outcomes. It's not the outcome, right? So I think that there is always a challenge in folks who have goals or pains. And I've come to, start talking about this as crocodiles or pots of gold, from some friends I have in the theory of constraints community. They always talk about alligators or crocodiles, depending on where they live, and then pots of gold. So are you running away from something? Are you trying to avoid something? Or are you trying to get something? And um, I think a great thing about what I hear from folks who have challenges and come to me for help with flow engineering is feeling like flow engineering first applies to the problem that they have. And their problems are usually very diverse. Like in a lot of cases, they have, they start with customer journey, and they're thinking of the flow of our customer journeys, um, very challenging, or there's lots of friction or complexity. Um, and we can start there. You can apply flow engineering to a customer journey and have a lot of success. It's not the primary use case, but it's still a flow. And so flow engineering still, I think, applies very well. But in a lot of cases, folks will come because they're looking to improve their door metrics, So there's that. There's any and all vanity metrics, or, aspirational metrics driving the conversation. And I think it's great that folks see flow engineering as a way to get started with those things that seems less complicated or less vague than other ways that they could tackle those problems. I think it's a great on-ramp to all kinds of things because it's very quick, it's very collaborative, it's very um, focused. So I see folks kind of try to map it onto a lot of different things that it wasn't necessarily designed for, but it was designed for flow. And so, like anywhere that there's friction or waste, I see folks solving that problem in, mapping it on like, oh, that sounds like it could work for us. And then they, call me up and we have a conversation and they say, it seems like this would be a fit. Like, what do you think? Do you think that this would work? And a lot of times they go and they try and do it themselves, and a lot of them succeed in doing it themselves. We have templates and stuff, and so that to me is a mark of success, that it's approachable enough for folks to try to map it on to a whole variety of problems.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Steve, for that. Wonderful. And now I'd like to welcome Amelia Gates. Please feel free to unmute, and Amelia, you can post your question to Steve.
Thanks. Hi, Steve. I'm just curious, do you have an example that you can share where something kind of unexpected sort of came out of applying flow engineering, something that may not have been picked up through traditional like value stream mapping or other workflow type analyses?
Hmm. Uh, I will tell you first, let me talk about the what folks expect to find and what we almost always find. And the thing that folks expect to find is some kind of local opportunity if we're trying to apply this at the team level. And I think that the state of teams is fairly good. Like, I think the teams are pretty good at doing work and managing flow. And things really just break down when you get beyond the boundaries of a team, right? So folks will try to apply this to optimize teams or benchmark teams, which I'm not a fan of because of what I'm about to tell you. And you could probably guess is that the challenges are always in external dependencies, but more often than that, it's upstream. It's how they take the work from stakeholders, from especially the stakeholders who come back from a conference and all of a sudden want to implement some new tool or make some change because they had a conversation with someone. And that gets crammed into the portfolio and their project management that they don't call project management because they know that that's not not nice, but it really is project management. And then, that takes forever because they don't have teams with ownership of customer needs or problem spaces or domains, however you want to call that. And so they have this huge upfront cost in taking these big things, and they don't even seem big, right? Implement a new tool. So it doesn't seem big from the business perspective, but then when you try to actually accomplish this change in the environment, it affects all kinds of teams. There's, a critical path that never gets mapped, and, it kind of happens organically that they just reach out to all these different teams. They probably pull people together and they still don't call it a project. And, it's a task force or whatever people just, they're allergic to reality. But there's this incredibly disruptive intake process that isn't measured. There's no performance management there. There's no visibility. It seems like it happens differently every single time. And the organization seems fine with it because there's always a finger to point at the teams. There's always a finger to point downstream because when you're closer to the outcome, those are the folks who bump over the deadline, not the intake process, not this upfront. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that is what, never ceases to amaze me. The shock that you can't just squeeze performance indefinitely out of teams when you ignore the intake process and how work gets to those teams.
Awesome. Thank you. Amelia, feel free to ask your follow-up question as well, so then we can move on to the next person. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, well, everything you said, Steve, is exactly what I'm sort of experiencing in my organization at the moment. There's this emphasis that the teams need to deliver more and do better at what we're doing. And there is a bit of a lack of recognition that the system is a complex beast and that there are actually other parts of it that's making the teams, or the flow down effect is causing disruption in the teams, and so that we need to actually point our lens more upstream to those system issues. So my follow-up question is, what's your advice for trying to shift that focus back upstream? Like, what might be useful for me to sort of point some people in a particular direction, or tools that I can use to point people in a particular direction that will essentially help to focus back upstream.
Mm-hmm. What's been really effective is, I know we probably have a ton of waste in intake, but it's difficult to prove that without proving that the waste is not downstream and that relatively we have at least 10x waste upstream. And the way to get to that 10x number is first you have to rule it out at the team level. You have to kind of disprove what the organization wants to prove first and satisfy that, if I get brought into an organization to map a team, I map the team. I'm not saying this is not where your problem is. I'll map the team so that we can show that it's not the problem. And maybe, again, maybe we're surprised. Maybe there is a huge opportunity. Maybe there's a quick win there. So I'll never try to shift the conversation without first doing the job that I was hired to do. And I think um, you have to do that due diligence to gain some credibility to go upstream. So you have to show that you've done the work and that you've kind of squeezed all the juice out of at least the low-hanging fruit at the team level. But you can collect all this anecdotal um, evidence from folks, and you can collect metrics. And often at the team level, what you can see is the portfolio ticket, the theme, whatever the highest level ticket that started the thing that eventually trickled down to the team, and look at the age of that thing. And then you can look at the age of those things, and they tend to be 600 plus days, 700 plus days. And so all of a sudden, a 2-week sprint for a feature in that bucket is not really telling the full story. And you can do that math yourself, which is great because you don't have to look upstream. But then you have a diplomacy challenge, right? You've got to broach this question in a very generous and curious way, very self-deprecating. I may be dumb, but can you help me put the picture together of how all this comes out to the teams? And do you think that there's value in looking at how we have that end-to-end flow actually happening? Because by looking at the data, it seems like there's a big opportunity. By talking to the teams, it seems like there's an opportunity there. And the opportunity seems to be if we improve that lead time, we improve all lead time because that's really the entry point for the entire environment. So that's been very, very successful. It's still a battle because you're bumping up against these projects that, um, they really actually want to do a lot of upfront planning because they feel like it gives them a lot of confidence. But once you start showing them the metrics or having a conversation about the metrics that they never look at, interesting things happen. And it can take some time, but it's very difficult to unsee that data once you see it. So that's been very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Steve. It's a nice, you talk about the data and metrics, and it's a nice segue to the next question. Leah, please feel free to unmute and ask the question to Steve, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Femke. Hi, Steve.
Hey.
So I'm lucky enough to be doing some value stream mapping kind of at the CEO level and C-suite level with some companies at the moment. So really approaching it from a business perspective, and technology is just one of the factors that we're looking at across the flow.
Absolutely.
So have you also worked with some companies like that? You mentioned Durametrics, but obviously it sounds very tech, and we played around. Actually, we did some work in my last company around speed to value, which kind of got on the group scorecard and resonated. But I'd be keen to hear what else have you seen and heard out there that's kind of business speak?
Well, one of the things that I always want to know when I walk into a client is what is the strategy in whatever form it exists? What's the strategy? What's the vision? What's the roadmap that's currently in play. And in play can be we have it, but we never look at it, and it doesn't actually guide any of our decisions, which is pretty common. Um, or, this is what we've got to accomplish. And so it's very helpful information because that tells me what's in scope and what's out of scope, what is priority, um, who are the key uh, contributors to that strategy. It's if it's a sales driven strategy, if it's a technology driven strategy, it could be a market driven strategy. There's all kinds of different ways, but it's very unique organization to organization. And I think that even in an organization, I'm in an organization right now, they have a strategy in the loosest of air quotes that exists in a slide deck, and I would say, and it's about 5 years old. But I found it very effective to use as an artifact because it's still directionally accurate. They still want these things. They haven't delivered any of it in the past 4 years, but it's still, you know, resonates with them. It still resonated with them, when they drew it up. And I think it's very important to put improvement in the context of what is it for, right? What does the business really want to accomplish? Because as you say, technology is just a piece of this puzzle. It's just a layer across the business, the same way that data is a layer across the business or information flow. Um, and so I really like to have things like vision statements or strategies or even, a slide deck that puts together some target because I want to make sure that I remain in alignment with that. Where the first thing that I do is just validate that, is this still directionally accurate? Is this still something that is very important to the organization? Or is there something more important, right? Because sometimes they'll share a bunch of stuff and there's some overlap or some things where, well, should I take this as the North Star or should I take that as the North Star? And I find that very, very helpful because as we get into flow engineering, it's the difference between, starting outcome discovery from scratch, which if you have the luxury of time is fantastic, but often you don't. And often you've got to move very quickly and folks want to see action and progress and results. And so having something like that narrow your scope and say, well, in service of this target outcome that we already know of, what is our next best step? What's the thing that we can do in 3 months? And let's clarify that and define that and use that. And I think that really helps you have a very productive and collaborative conversation with leadership at any level, because that's kind of how they think, right? I mean, some of them are thinking longer term than that, and you can use that as your frame. But often it's, I get called into organizations where they're like, we were already over capacity and running around with their hair on fire, and now we've got this ERP project, and now we've got, this implementation to do. And so they're less doing navigation, they're bailing out the boat, or they're struggling with how to make the next best decision. So understanding where they want to go really helps with that.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Steve. I mean, when you mentioned about the last point, like there are so many other competing priorities. Like, you see the WIP limit always keep increasing, it exceeds the capacity of the
Absolutely.
organization. And sometimes, and all of a sudden, the prioritization changes, and some of the major program where you've been deep in for 18 months and got dropped off just like that, and then everybody shifted to a different things, right? So it's a common thing that we see as well. Thank you very much. And David, it's your turn to ask the question. David Berry, please. Thank you.
Hi. Steve, my question is, what good tools have you used to map your value streams?
This is a great question. I
Or
still
the opposite of that, what tools to avoid?
I would say I would avoid anything overcomplicated. I think that it's really important to make sure that the folks doing the mapping feel comfortable. So I will just use whatever the organization uses to visually collaborate. Because I don't think as an industry, the products that are aiming to do value stream mapping have nailed it yet. And I talked to a lot of them, and a lot of them they're going to get there, but I don't use any of them today. I use Mural and Miro,
Yep.
depending on my customer.
Yep.
And that's about it. Some of them use Lucid Spark. Some of them, I've run mapping workshops where we wanted to use Mural, and it turned out that nobody got accounts before the session, or the tool was blocked, and so we used like PowerPoint. It really doesn't matter to me. I don't think it really compromises the process at all to use a very, very simple tool or whatever is closest at hand. And we still have fantastic results with folks using markers and paper or post-it notes. So I think there's a lot of possibility to automate. I've had very, very interesting conversations about doing automated flow engineering where all the maps are generated from real data and they're continuously updated.
So they pull from
And there's
dashboards and columns and whatnot. So
sorry.
when you see a ticket move across a team's dashboard, for example, then that reflects back into a higher level map that reflects that movement. Is that the type of
Right.
thing the
Right.
vision that you
Yeah.
see?
Yeah. So we're starting to see tools, and I can't talk about them yet, but we're starting to see tools where there is an abstraction between the data of work and the interface of how that's represented and how that's interacted with. And I really think that's bringing us to kind of like a golden age of tooling where you could take the same information represented very different ways, but behind the scenes you have kind of a graph of information that's related by whatever dimensions you want to relate that data. And that's really what you need in this space, because there's a lot of different dimensions to this work, right? When we map out a value stream, we have quality data to it. There's role data. There's data about value added time, which is not that's not data that exists in Jira or anywhere today. But they're really just facets or attributes of a specific activity at any given time, right? And there's the interesting thing to that is that there's history to that, right? It matters. Are we talking about it? We want to look at it as of last week or 3 months ago, or we want to compare 3 months ago to last week. And the tooling that exists right now, most of it doesn't do any of that. So we have a ways to go before I can recommend something that will do an excellent job there. But what we're going to do is go from, zero automation to fully automated flow engineering. And still the most valuable aspect of it will be the conversations. And there is a very real possibility that the conversations suffer because there won't be a prompt for people to really reconcile their perspectives on that data, right? Once you have data, you kind of take it as the truth and you move on to other things. But what it means and how you understand it in your role in reconciliation with everybody else who's involved is the magic. And that's something that I don't know how you get that from a tool. There's certainly ways that you can have AI driven facilitation to kind of pull that out of the group, but today that's a very, very human thing, and I think that's a very, very human thing for long after the tools are getting you the perfect data.
Thank you very much for the practical answer. I thought Steve, was thinking like you will probably will come out, use this one, two, three, four. No, but thanks very much for sharing practically because I mean, in the past I worked as a value stream architect, so I know the challenge exists in the space. Like when you're working in a digital product value stream, the way how you collect the data and metrics is a different experience, and then some people think that the Jira has anything and everything inside. So you only take the Jira data, but also people working on other tools. So you miss the whole holistic view of it. And thank you very much for that. And I like
One
the
thing,
idea.
if I can add one thing, I think that the most valuable outcome I've ever seen from flow engineering is a, a mindset change from folks who go through the mapping exercises and as a result see and think about and talk about and interact with their work differently. They think about work in the ways that you start to think about work if you really think about, the theory behind the things like the theory of constraints and lean and all these things that there's huge bodies of knowledge for and lots of practice behind. You kind of intuitively learn that as a result of doing the mapping exercises. And that's very, very difficult without experiential learning, right? I mean, you don't really get the same aha moments. You don't feel it. You don't internalize it to the same degree. I've read lots of books about lots of different topics, and I learn the most when I do a workshop, when I interact with something directly. That's what remaps my brain. That's what changes my perspective. And so no tool um, in the foreseeable future will do that. I can foresee it, but it's not on the horizon. I don't see it anytime soon.
Thank you, Steve. And participants, like last 10 minutes. And if you have any burning questions related to this flow engineering, so please don't keep that with you. Please get it out to Steve. In the meantime, I'll ask you one question, Steve. Given the current state of the artificial intelligence with all this OpenAI and ChatGPTs and DeepSeek and all this, what is the biggest problem that you see in the larger organization, and what do you think that needs to improve? Um, like, is it specific to industry, specific to particular business or region? Do you see that, in improving the flow in the organization?
Well, I think the big risk to organizations is the fact that they're all running at full capacity prior to generative AI, right? And the odds that any of these companies said, okay, well, first of all, let's look at this and consider it a new layer, the same way that we consider um, off-the-shelf software or data, or there are these layers of um, technical capability. And generative AI is a new layer that spans the entire organization. That capacity does not, you can't just add 10% to your stack and expect no increase in cognitive load or you know, expect not to eliminate some waste to make space for that. So I think that in a lot of organizations, they're now taking 100% capacity teams and now throwing generative AI into their context, which I think is very exciting for the folks who are, in the mix, and they could probably, make up for that capacity challenge with enthusiasm. Maybe they're running at 120% because they're excited about what's possible. But I don't think that this is really sustainable without really seriously considering what is the value that we are trying to get. And I think that really requires stepping back from the work uh, periodically, ideally on a regular basis, and trying to sort out what is adding value, what's not adding value, and from all the perspectives that is really important for. So what's valuable to the business, what's valuable to the end customer, what's valuable to the from a Kanban perspective, the next person in the chain. Um, so I think that there is a challenge in mapping generative AI to value, um, and that will manifest itself across the entire business. I see it in product right now. I mean, everybody's probably used a tool that now has generative AI that is absolutely useless, right? I will call out Miro for this. Miro's generative AI has not helped me at all. Like, it's a whole thing. I go into the app, it's telling me about all this stuff. I try it, it's garbage. And I wish they would spend their time on doing a better job of the things that they already have. I still can't copy and paste into Miro and not have a complete mess every single time I do it. I see people laughing, and I love this. So generative AI in 99% of cases is just a tax that's being paid by people who don't understand customer value, and they're creating a ton of waste, right? All these features are waste. They're all confusing to customers, and there's going to be some competitor who takes the time to try to get product market fit and thinks about this from the ground up, that puts them out of business. Because if they're just tacking on features and not considering value, that's, to me, it's the death of every business we know of.
Awesome. Actually, that reminds me, the Satya Nadella, the Microsoft CEO's latest interview, where he says it is not generating a measurable value yet. So thank you very much, Steve, for that. And we do have a room for one final question, and that goes to Con. Please unmute and then, yeah, come off the screen. Yes, thank you very much. Right.
Great. Thanks. Hi, Steve. I just wanted to ask, you go and create a value stream map, you work with teams, you create insights. How many people actually go back and revisit their value stream maps and dependency charts and all the things after they've got the insights? I've kind of found that people don't. And is there a way to get that incentive to happen?
That's a great point. I think that continuous improvement is probably one of the rarest things in the business landscape, right? I mean, the practice of actually practicing and committing to continuous improvement, I think, is very rare. I don't practice it myself. I think it's extremely challenging. The only person I know of who practices it is Andrew, my co-author, wears the improvement kata in a card around he wore the card around his neck for months, maybe 6 months, to remind himself to do continuous improvement and to internalize it. And he's a monk. He was a monk for 15 years. So if that's what it takes for Andrew to do it, I think most of us don't have a chance. And so I think it's a very challenging thing. I think success really hinges on the proper incentives. The company really has to value, and what valuing means is celebrating failure, success, just doing the thing, just making the effort and in the right way. There's so many organizations where they'll do a retro and they'll come up with action items and they'll essentially end the meeting with, we'll try harder next time, right? And that does not that does not grow an environment of continuous improvement. Um, I think it takes really dedicated attention towards the incentives for improvement and the incentives for building the muscle. It's a very difficult thing, just like building any type of muscle or building any type of capability. Um, but that being said, there's a lot of organizations that have, you know, a dashboard for their team, and the dashboard is a interactive whiteboard that they have instrumented properly. They're actually connecting. They're, as difficult as this is to do in Miro and Mural and all the tools that are out there, they have Jira connected, and they go in there as a team at least once a week, and that space can have their value stream map on it. And so every iteration or at whatever cadence, they can come together as a group and ask a question: where have you felt friction? Where do you think there's opportunity for a flow improvement? And that's all it takes. I think that we can overcomplicate these things. I don't think you really have to do start to finish flow engineering from scratch ever once you've done it. You have a living artifact. You have a space that you could just iterate on once you've done it. And so I expect that teams will just periodically come in and just ask that question. Um, is there where's our new constraint effectively, right? And I think if you keep it very simple and you make space for it, and I think the easiest way to make space for it is to just add it into something that's already happening that you can make 10% more efficient, because you can always do that, and then take that 10% and put it towards, let's look at the value stream and ask that question.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for asking wonderful, very engaging, insightful questions. And thank you, Steve, for patiently answering all this. And we understand it's 2 a.m., but I can see that, the flow of your passion flows through this this meetup. And once again, thank you very much. We do have a couple of questions. I'm not sure, Maria. Probably we will try to answer them offline because we are on dot at the moment. We are a minute over now at the moment. So, Khan and also Ram, thank you very much for your questions. Sorry that we couldn't able to ask this question in this session, but we will try to get you the answers offline
I
from
will
Steve.
answer any and all questions. I love questions. I really appreciate everyone asking questions and being interested in the space. It makes me feel incredibly happy to meet with you all and see the enthusiasm for this type of work. I think it's really rare and wonderful that folks step away from the work to work on the work. So I applaud everybody for being with me, and I'm very happy to be here anytime I can.